Love whenever we have the chance to visit with our next guest.
Absolutely.
Welcome back, OutKick 360 across the OutKick network. Mike Pereira, Fox Sports NFL rules analyst. He is the head of officiating as well for the USFL, which returns this spring. The hubs have been announced. We'll get to that coming up. Mike, hope you're doing well.
I am doing great, and it's always been great being with you guys. So good to see you.
Absolutely. Before we get started on the rules and conference championship weekend and this NFL is rigged crowd, what's the top Brady story that comes to mind for you in your interactions with him?
Somebody asked me that this morning, and I said, the only thing I can really remember is I was at Foxborough in the stadium, and he came out before the game, as he does, and did like a sprint or a jog, I should say, around the field. And I didn't know Tom Brady from Adam. I mean, I never met him. I obviously knew who he was. And as he was running around, he was running by me, and he looked at me as he ran by and said, "Hi, Mike." And it made my day. I mean, that was like, that's like my most memorable thing. It's like Tom Brady actually said hello to me. I had no idea that he even knew who I was. And, as people have said that, he is a great guy, but I really haven't spent any time with him yet. Don't know if I will, but, we'll just see what's coming up.
Whenever you were the voice for all officials in the NFL, Mike, you, Dean Blandino, who replaced you, we had a voice. We had a voice of reason in a week like this, off of the weekend, off the Sunday, where there were so many calls and reaction to it from the fan perspective. How would you have handled Monday morning with the media and with fans if you were still in that position?
Well, I'd have to go to Roger Goodell first and say, "Do you want me to talk to the fans and the media and see what he has to say, what he would have to say?" I will have to say that since Dean and I, there's been kind of a clampdown on the interview process that comes out of the officiating department. And I don't think that's healthy. People are so invested in the game now, whether it is their hometown team, their fantasy team, their bet, whatever, that, I think they need to know, deserve to know, what happened. And if they can understand the rules better and understand the circumstance, then, I think it's better off. But to be kind of closed mouth is pretty difficult. Now, I think if it was me, my impression was that the championship games were just messy. I can't think of really a better word other than messy. I in particular didn't have a real problem with the calls. I just had a concern with, how they went about this and how it made officiating look, whether it was the awarding of another play to Kansas City because of a clock malfunction. Why did that happen? I mean, it really never was truly explained why it did happen. Why did we not get a replay review on the Devonta Smith catch on fourth down on the first series in Philadelphia, Eagles against San Francisco? There's a reason for most things that something falls outside of just judgment. And, judgment is judgment. I mean, it's hard to necessarily take side when it's judgment. But when it comes to mechanics and processes and things like that, so it's really reared their heads this weekend, I think I would have addressed both of those two issues right away, and then see if it calmed the storm a little bit.
Mike, speaking of mechanics and processes, I've noticed refs going further and further to stop a play that's dead, that's ruled dead. I've seen officials step in between the snap and the holder on a kick to not let them get up a practice kick if there's a timeout called or anything like that. And I heard a couple times, well, the crowd noise is really bad, so they had a hard time stopping the play. But I don't see that as a common issue across both the NFL and college football. Is that more common than we're aware of the inability to stop the play because of crowd noise when you're trying to blow a play dead? Because there's a lot of player safety concerns if half the players know the play's dead and half don't if the play continues.
Yeah, I don't think it's an issue. I mean, that obviously comes about from awarding Kansas City another play against Cincinnati. What happened there? And I think think what we're going through is the officiating department and the league itself has taken a positive step with what they call expedited reviews and video assists. So they're able to correct things, correct mistakes that are made in pretty close to real time. I think we're all for that, but there are some issues that still go along with it. And I think that's what happened, for example, in the play with Kansas City, where it seemed like they ran a play, but then they voided the play. And the reason was because, and really they created their own issue with this video assistant. The video assistant said, move the ball a half a yard, that the spot was off by a half a yard and the play clock was already beginning to run down. Yeah, that's right. They missed the spot by half a yard, but it was 3rd and 9. It wasn't like it was 3rd and a half yard.
Right.
It was insignificant then, which led to this series of having a hard time getting the play shut down. Not all the officials realizing that the clock was running when it shouldn't have been. And then, of course, what happens? You have another play, you shut it down, and then you kind of look. Sometimes you want to be lucky when you have an issue. Well, they sacked Mahomes, so it really wasn't going to give them another play. But guess what? There was a defensive holding, so they got an automatic first down. I think we have to be a little concerned about overuse of expedited reviews and video assistance. When it came to the Devonta Smith catch in that first series in the Eagles game, I mean, it is the way the rule is set up that the offense can run up and snap the ball as quickly as they can because the play clock starts automatically after the play is over. So Philadelphia rushes to the line. Nobody gets a chance to find the one angle that shows that the pass was incomplete. We didn't at Fox. New York didn't to initiate an expedited review. And, Shanahan, either for the 49ers, he didn't get a look, and it led him not to challenge. So, that whole thing just seems like it's a bit unfair to let such a critical call go unreviewed like that. So it's just, when you think of the fact and what makes games messy. I mean, when you have to stop to try to look to see if a ball hit a guide wire, when you have to stop because the chains broke and you have to get a set of backup chain for the second time in the playoffs and unravel the backup set of chain. It just was messy, and it ended up causing a lot of conversation. But the games aren't fixed. We all know that the games aren't fixed, but they seem like if your team seems to be the brunt of many of the decisions, and you either lose your bet or you lose your fantasy team takes a loss. But it just wasn't a clean looking championship weekend.
Mike Pereira, our guest on OutKick 360. Are the best officials now in the media because it pays better?
Or the best officials in the media? I mean, it was actually Aaron Rodgers, I think, who made that comment, who said the reason that the officiating struggled because their best white hats have gone to the networks because they pay more money. Well, let me just say this: I was the first, and I wasn't even a white hat, and I was only on the field for 2 years before I went into the office. Blandino's never officiated a game in his life. I mean, he made one key call in one game that he thinks merits him all of the qualifications to be king referee, and that one call that he made was in a beach Pro Bowl football game on a tight sideline catch. You could say the same for McCauley, and you certainly could say the same for Perry, and you could say the same for Sterator. He has a point. I certainly didn't leave it for the money. And Blandino, maybe there's a point there from his administrative side in leaving. But the fact is, I do think that officials are underappreciated, and I think they are underpaid for the magnitude of the game, and especially when it comes to the administrative side. Art McNally, who got into the Hall of Fame, 24 years he was the head of officiating. Jerry Seaman, 10. Me, I was there for 12. And since then, nobody's been there longer than 3. There's no continuity, and there needs to be more continuity. And I think there needs to be more value put on the position.
Given your profile and status, talking about officiating, Mike, do you see yourself as an advocate for officials everywhere at every level when you talk to anyone and you're talking about the process of officiating? Because we know there are issues finding officials at every level of almost every sport in America right now. So is that something that's important to you?
It's like critically important to me. It's more important to me than what I do with Fox, quite frankly. I have a foundation that gives scholarships to veterans to become sports officials in their communities. In the last 5 years now, we've given 800 scholarships around the country to get our veterans back doing something, getting them involved in the team again. I'm working on a program here in Sacramento now with a local high school football team and taking their seniors who aren't going to move on to play football at the community college level or above and trying to keep them involved in the game. I mean, these are young men, and I'm going to do it for all sports, but it's young men in the case of football at this point who've been playing football probably since they were 10 in the youth leagues. And now they've had coaching, discipline, teams, all this stuff. And now what happens to them? And I try to work this through the coach. What are we concerned about where these kids are going to go when they lose this regimen of practice and games? And so we're recruiting them to become officials, young men to become officials, and women in sports. And so it's what drives me now. It's what drives me is to look at the big picture of officiating and try to address the shortage, and then equally try to address the reputation. I mean, it's so easy to bash them, but these are quality people. I mean, these are people who have the guts that all these people that bash them don't have. These are people that put their butts on the line, you know, when they know that they're going to get criticized. And so we've got to change somehow the way that people treat them and the abuse that they have to go through and the lack of respect that they have. Because in reality, and nobody really wants to admit to it, but it's true. I mean, you don't have officials, you don't have a game. I mean, that's just the way it is. And poor high schools right now are having to play on Thursdays, Saturdays, because they don't have enough officials to officiate all the games on Friday. That's how dire the situation is. So yeah, that's my huge concern.
Mike, final thing on the current status of officiating. Carl Sheffers is the white hat for Super Bowl 57 with the All-Star crew. Can you take us through the short version of how they go about choosing the All-Star crew, with which referee will be wearing the white hat for the Super Bowl?
Yeah, it's not too complicated, but they're graded with everything they do. I mean, they're practically graded for when they go to the bathroom during the pregame meeting. So it's just a matter of how they grade out over the course of the year, not only just with their calls on the field, but it's their rules knowledge by way of tests, their physical ability, all the stuff, all kind of factors into a grade. And then you either end up in the top tier, second tier, the third tier, or it could be fourth and fifth tier. You don't want to be on fourth and fifth tier, because if you're on fourth and fifth tier, that's your first step on the way to being sent home for the rest of your officiating career. So you go to the first tier, and who qualifies for the first tier? It might be 5 guys. And then you look and you say, okay, who hasn't officiated? If all of these 5 have, who's had it last? And then you say, okay, here's our guy. And in this case, it's Carl Sheffers, who is a very accomplished referee, his 3rd one that he's going to have. California guy whose father was a great official and a great teacher. People say, well, Sheffers' crew led the league in the number of penalties called this year, which is true. But this is not Sheffers' crew. I mean, this is an all-star group. And you know, I happen to be a crew guy. I think you should advance crews. Guys that work together all year long, I think they should move together through the playoffs, but that's not the way it works. It's the best officials, not necessarily the best officiating. But I just hope that we, in the game in Arizona on Sunday, and that we pick up the papers on Monday and go on all the talk shows and listen to the talk shows. And I hope we don't hear one stinking word about Carl Cheffers or anybody else on his crew or anything about officiating, period. It's a funny thing. I always consider, it's not funny, but I always considered this the most important game of the Super Bowl for a different reason when it comes to officiating. If you screw up the Super Bowl, or people think that you screw up the Super Bowl, they're going to remember that through the whole off season. If you have a good game in the Super Bowl and you go unnoticed, then the previous stuff kind of drifts away. And so based on what happened this past Sunday, a lot of pressure on them, but they've got good experience coupled with a couple of new guys, and I think they'll be fine.
We're headed to season 2 with the USFL, and we've got hubs announced officially: Birmingham, Memphis, Canton, Ohio, and Detroit. And I'm assuming we'll have some adjustments to some rules, because I know you're all about implementing other things that you couldn't do in year one as you got things off the ground. What are we looking forward to this spring with USFL from your department?
Well, it's interesting, not a lot. Of course, it changes now with 4 hubs, so we're going to be playing in 4 different locations. So I've had to add officials, and which is fine. The group that we basically have is 80% of it is made up of officials that are on the NFL developmental list. We looked at the rules, and we were pretty pleased with what it was last year. We were still a little bit concerned about game times, especially now in the hub format. You're going to have the possibility of one game playing into another. So we wanted to, if we could, guarantee that we played them in a 3-hour window. So last year we wound the clock after incomplete passes in the first and third quarters, which sped up our game. We thought it was a good change, but still we think it wasn't quite enough. So we're going to wind the clock, and in the second and fourth quarters also, after incomplete passes, up until the 5-minute mark of the quarter. And we'll see in the first couple of weeks where that makes our time frame fall. Going to take away a couple of plays, I understand that, but still, I think that if the game time gets where we want it to be, I think it will be a good change. And then we're going to adopt what everybody asks about it. Maybe you go on the social media, and the rule everybody hates. Why, if you fumble the ball at the 10-yard line and it goes out of bounds at the 8, you bring the ball back at the 10. But if you fumble the ball at the 2 and it goes out of bounds in the end zone, you lose the ball. It's inconsistent. You should get the ball back at the spot of the fumble. So we're listening to the fans and we're listening to the critics. So a forward fumble into and out of bounds in the end zone will go back to the spot of the fumble, and the offense will keep the ball. And it will be interesting to see, what kind of comment that we end up getting from, from the people that are watching our game. But again, I think that's another rule change that makes a certain amount of sense, especially when everybody likes offense. Mm-hmm. So you're keeping the ball a little bit. But, other than that, I mean, really everything is pretty good. We're going to try to stay away from, as you recall, we changed some rules during the season. And we like that we could do that in year one. We're going to try not to do that this year. I mean, we figure that we are good at where we are. We're going to make one slight adjustment to the kickoff. I mean, we like kickoff returns. 81% of our kickoffs were returned last year, kicking off from the 25. Well, we want to get it to 90. So we're going to kick off from the 20. So we are likely to push that number up toward 90% of kickoffs being returned, which we put in elements to keep it safe. I mean, we don't let the kicking team recover the ball if it goes beyond 20 yards. Kicking team can't get a head start. Defensive receiving team has to put a minimum of 9 guys in what we call a setup zone. We didn't have too many injuries last year. If we did, we wouldn't have gone forward with this, but we think with these formational adjustments that we're good in that area. So we're excited. And for me, I mean, I am the replay center. We will have the replay center in Los Angeles again. And so I kind of look at it and think of it from the NFL perspective to this. To me, the NFL thing is with me right now. I'm commenting on what others have done. And now when it gets into the USFL, I'm doing it. And others will be commenting on what I'm doing. So I'll take more flack probably, but it was a lot of fun. And it's the first spring league I've been involved with that has gone longer than 1 year.
Yes.
So I'm really excited about that.
Yes.
In the final 15 seconds, you are the one who has reviewed roughing the passer. I watched multiple games where you did that. You took the flag back. How easy is that compared to whenever the NFL tried to review defensive pass interference?
I think it certainly is easier, but I think it would be harder on the NFL side than it is in what we do in the USFL, because they give more protection even to the quarterback than we are going to give them. So it would be hard on the NFL, I think, to review roughing the passer, but for us, not as difficult.
That crushes our dreams, Chad.
Yes.
Yes.
But my dreams are now revived with that rule change with the fumble into the end zone.
Yep.
So great job.
See, there you go. Now we'll see if the NFL will follow that up. Yeah.
They'll be watching, that's for sure, on all these rules adjustments from the USFL. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. Great perspective as always. We love having you.
You're welcome. Good to be with you.
Yeah. Mike Pereira, USFL head of officiating, and he is the rules analyst, the guy for Fox Sports, and he'll have plenty of coverage for Super Bowl 57.